The air at Blackwood Creek's municipal airstrip tasted of dust and pine resin and the faint hot scent of aviation fuel. Vance tasted only impatience. She stood beside the gleaming obsidian door of the company car, a stark slash of urban geometry against the soft, sun-bleached landscape. Her suit was Italian silk, the color of a thunderhead, and it felt alien here. A costume from another world, the world where she belonged, the world she commanded. Her jet, a sleek silver dart that was more weapon than vehicle, sat on the tarmac being refueled. It was a tedious, necessary delay, a punctuation mark in a sentence she was eager to finish. The deal was done. Another tract of land absorbed into the Vantage Corporation portfolio, another set of numbers that would tilt upward on a quarterly report. It was simple. It was clean. It was what she did. Her gaze swept the area, cataloguing inefficiencies. The cracked asphalt, the peeling paint on the single hangar building, the general lack of urgency that seemed to infect rural places like a slow-moving virus. Her eyes landed on a truck. It was a relic, a thing of rust and dents, its color a faded memory of forest green. It was parked near the hangar, looking less like a vehicle and more like a permanent, decaying fixture of the landscape. A man was securing a large, rough-hewn wooden crate in the truck's bed, his movements patient and deliberate. He wore jeans and a plain gray shirt, the fabric stretched taut across a broad back. His focus was absolute, as if tying down that crate was the most important task in the world. A small girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sat on the lowered tailgate, drawing in a sketchbook with a set of colored pencils. Elara's driver, a local man hired for the day, stood silently by the car. She gave a small, dismissive nod toward the scene. It was a shame, really, that some people's entire lives could fit into the back of such a pathetic vehicle. She said as much, her voice carrying on the dry breeze, a sliver of cool disdain. Some people really ought to know their limits. The man didn't flinch. He didn't look up. He simply tested the rope one last time, his calloused hands moving with an artisan's certainty. The knot held. The little girl, however, did look up. Her eyes, a clear, startling blue, met Elara's. There was no judgment in her gaze, only a quiet, unnerving curiosity. She held up her drawing. It was a picture of a bird, fierce and detailed, with wings that seemed too big for the page. Then she went back to her work, adding a speck of yellow to the bird's eye. Elara felt a flicker of something uncomfortable. Annoyance. She turned away, pulling her phone from her clutch. She tapped the screen, bringing up market data. Numbers were safe. Numbers were logical. They didn't have startling blue eyes. Her pilot, a man named Henderson, with a perpetually calm demeanor, approached from the jet. He had bad news. Elara could see it in the set of his shoulders. There was a delay, Henderson explained. Indefinite. Air traffic control had put a hold on all departures. A priority flight was being given clearance. Priority? Elara's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. In this place? Who could possibly have priority over the Vantage jet? Henderson was apologetic but firm. A Gulfstream G650, he said. It filed its flight plan last minute. It had been granted immediate takeoff. It belonged to a Mr. Thorne. The name meant nothing to her. Some local lumber baron, perhaps, or a tech mogul hiding out in the woods. It didn't matter. It was an inconvenience, and Elara Vance did not tolerate inconveniences. She was about to instruct Henderson to fix it, to leverage the Vantage name, to make the problem disappear, when she saw the movement. The man from the rusted green truck was walking toward the runway. He had lifted the little girl from the tailgate and now held her hand. The sketchbook was tucked under his other arm. They walked not toward the parking lot, but toward the Gulf Stream, the gleaming white apex predator of private aviation that dwarfed even her own considerable jet. As they passed her jet, the man looked over. He met Henderson's eyes and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Then his gaze found Elara. It was a brief, level look. It held no anger, no judgment, no triumph. It was the look of a man who saw things exactly as they were. He saw her standing there, a queen on a cracked asphalt chessboard, and then he simply looked away, his attention returning to his daughter. He and the girl climbed the stairs into the Gulf Stream. The door hissed shut. Elara stood frozen. The silk of her suit suddenly felt heavy and ridiculous. The hot wind blew a strand of hair across her face, and for a moment she forgot to brush it away. The truck, the man, the jet. The pieces did not fit. Her driver cleared his throat. "That's Caleb Thorne," he offered, his voice low. "He and Lily. They fly out every few weeks." Elara didn't respond. She was watching the Gulfstream taxi to the runway. She watched it accelerate, a whisper of power that became a roar. She watched it lift into the sky, impossibly graceful, and bank to the west. Only then did she look back at the rusted green truck, still parked by the hangar with its cargo of one solitary wooden crate. It was a problem without a column on her spreadsheet, a variable she hadn't accounted for, and Elara Vance hated variables. She got back in the car. She needed to know who Caleb Thorne was, not out of curiosity, out of necessity. He was an anomaly, and anomalies in her world were either opportunities or threats. Back in her temporary office at the local inn, she put her team to work. The name was Caleb Thorne. The location was Blackwood Creek. She wanted everything. Financials, history, associations. She expected the file within the hour. While she waited, she stared out the window at the town. It was a place built of wood and stone and time. The opposite of her world of glass and steel and speed. Her father had loved places like this. He had spoken of them with a strange reverence she never understood. He used to say that land doesn't rush. You have to meet it on its terms. Her father. The thought of him was a dull ache, a room in her memory she kept locked. He had built Vantage Corporation from nothing, a titan of industry. And then he had let it all slip away in his final years, lost in sentiment and nostalgia. Elara had spent the last 5 years since his death, clawing it all back, fortifying the walls, purging the weakness he had allowed to creep in. The file arrived as a secure digital link. She opened it. The first page was perplexing. Caleb Thorne. No significant credit history, no listed employment. Property records showed he owned a large tract of forested land just outside of town. The deed paid in cash 10 years ago. The property was designated as a protected forestry trust, unusable, undevelopable, worthless, from a corporate perspective. He was a widower. His wife, Sarah Thorne, had died 9 years prior. The cause of death was listed as an accident. His daughter was Lillian Thorne. Lily. Elara scrolled deeper. This was the thin file of a ghost, a man living off the grid. It didn't align with the Gulfstream G650. She sent a clipped message to her analyst. Dig deeper. Cross-reference the jet's tail number. Find the Shell Corporation. Find the money. The reply came back in minutes. The jet wasn't registered to a corporation. It was registered to him. Personally attached was another file, this one older, pulled from a deeper archive. It was a professional profile. Caleb Thorne. Juris Doctor Stanford. Former senior partner at a top-tier San Francisco law firm specializing in environmental law and corporate ethics. He had been a legend. a crusader who had taken on and won against corporate giants. He had dismantled monopolies, exposed fraud, and championed landmark conservation cases. Then, 10 years ago, he had vanished. He had resigned from his firm, liquidated his assets, and disappeared from public life entirely. The same year he bought the land in Blackwood Creek. The same year he married Sarah. Elara closed the file. The man in the rusted truck was not a simple woodcutter. He was a king in exile, a highly skilled professional who had chosen to live a simple life. The question was why? And what did it have to do with the land she had just acquired for Vantage? The tracts bordered his own protected trust. It was the only piece of the puzzle that seemed to connect. The next day, she decided on a new course of action. The jet could wait. She instructed her driver to take her to the Thorn property. She told herself it was due diligence, a loose end to be tied. But she knew it was more than that. It was the anomaly, the variable. She needed to solve for it. The road to his property was unpaved, a winding dirt track that climbed through dense forest. The city car struggled. Finally, they reached a simple wooden gate. A sign, carved by hand, read simply, Thorn. There was no intercom, no security camera, just the gate and the woods. She got out of the car, the sharp click of her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. She walked to the gate and stood there, a figure of sharp angles and dark colors in a world of dappled light and green. She didn't have to wait long. He emerged from the trees, not in the rusted truck, but on foot. He moved with a quiet economy, his steps sure on the uneven ground. He carried a small axe in one hand, its blade clean and sharp. He stopped on the other side of the gate, regarding her with the same unnerving calm she remembered from the airstrip. "Miss Vance," he said. His voice was a low baritone, steady and calm. "I had a feeling you might come." She hadn't expected him to know her name. It put her at a slight disadvantage, which she immediately sought to correct. "I'm here about the land, Mr. Thorn. The parcels adjacent to your property. Vantage Corporation has acquired them for development." He leaned the axe against a fence post. "I'm aware." His lack of reaction was a strategy, she decided, a negotiation tactic. He wanted something. Everyone always wanted something. "I'm prepared to make you a generous offer for your property as well," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "It would consolidate the entire valley. It would be efficient." "My land isn't for sale," he replied. It wasn't a refusal so much as a statement of fact, like saying the sky was blue. "Everything is for sale, Mr. Thorn," she countered, a familiar line from 1,000 negotiations. "It's only a matter of finding the right price." He looked at her then, a long, searching look. "Not everything, Miss Vance. Some things have a value you can't put a number on." He gestured to the woods behind him. "My wife is buried here." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. It was a wall she could not breach with money, a language her transactional world had no words for. Before she could recalibrate, the little girl, Lily, appeared at her father's side. She was holding a small, crudely made sandwich on a paper plate. She held it out through the bars of the gate. "For you," she said softly. "You might be hungry." Elara stared at the offering, a child's sandwich. It was absurd. It was kind. It was a gesture so far outside the realm of her experience that she didn't know how to react. Caleb placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Lily," he said, a quiet admonishment. But the girl persisted, her small hand steady. Elara found herself reaching out. Her manicured fingers, accustomed to signing 9-figure deals, closed around the paper plate. "Thank you," she heard herself say. The words felt foreign in her own mouth. She stood there, holding a peanut butter sandwich, while Caleb Thorne and his daughter turned and walked back into the woods, disappearing into the trees. She was left alone at the gate, the silent forest on one side, her silent driver on the other. She didn't eat the sandwich, but she didn't throw it away either. She carried it back to the car, a strange, inexplicable artifact from a world she was beginning to realize she knew nothing about. That night, a storm rolled in over the mountains. The wind howled, and rain lashed against the windows of her inn. The power went out. Plunged into darkness and silence, Elara felt a profound sense of dislocation. Her phone had no signal. Her laptop was dead. The digital tethers that connected her to her empire were cut. She was just a woman in a dark room in a small town she didn't know. A knock came at her door. It was the innkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, holding a lit oil lamp. She had brought an extra for the city lady, she said with a gentle smile. In the flickering lamplight, Elara saw the sandwich, still sitting on the desk where she'd left it. She thought of the girl's small, steady hand. She thought of the father's quiet dignity. And she felt the first crack in the armor she had so carefully constructed around herself. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Elara received a call. It was from her head of security in the city. The call was scrambled, the connection poor, but the message was clear. There had been a breach, a sophisticated one. Someone had bypassed Vantage's firewalls and accessed a series of sealed files. Specifically, the files related to the Blackwood Creek acquisition. And something else. They had also accessed her late father's personal archives. Who? Elara demanded. The trace was difficult, the security chief said, but they had a preliminary location. The hack had originated from a satellite uplink, a powerful, private one. The coordinates were for a remote, heavily wooded area. The coordinates for Caleb Thorne's property. The game had changed. This wasn't a simple land dispute anymore. Thorne wasn't just a recluse. He was an active player. He was a threat. She called her legal team. She called Anya, her most trusted counsel. She explained the situation, the man, the land, the data breach. Anya's response was cautious. A man like that, Elara, a man who walks away from that kind of power, he doesn't do it lightly. He doesn't re-engage for no reason. There's something in those files he wants, something he's willing to risk everything for. You need to find out what it is. But Elara's first instinct was to attack. She instructed her lawyers to file an injunction against Thorne for corporate espionage, to freeze his assets, to use the full weight of the Vantage legal machine to crush him. The first salvo was fired. A local sheriff's deputy, looking deeply uncomfortable, served the papers at Thorne's gate later that day. Elara watched from her car, parked 100 yards down the road. Thorne took the papers without a word. He read them, his face unreadable. Then he folded them neatly and put them in his pocket. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. That evening, the counterattack came. It was not what she expected. It wasn't a legal motion. It was an email, sent to her private account. It contained a single attachment, a scanned document. It was a letter. Handwritten, she recognized the elegant looping script immediately. It was her father's handwriting. The letter was addressed to Sarah Thorne, Caleb's late wife. Elara's hand closed around the mouse, her knuckles white. She read the words, and the floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. The letter was an apology. Her father was apologizing to Sarah for something the company had done. He wrote of a terrible mistake, a report that was buried, a chemical spill that was covered up. A project in the very valley Elara was now trying to develop. He wrote that he had been pushed into it by his board, by a young, ambitious executive who saw only profit. An executive named Marcus. Marcus Thorne. Her mind raced. Marcus Thorne was on her board. He was her father's former prot, a man Elara had always distrusted, but whose ruthlessness she had found useful. He was the one who had championed the Blackwood Creek development project, pushing it through with aggressive forecasts and slick presentations, and his name was Thorne. She ran the search herself this time. Caleb Thorne. Marcus Thorne. Brothers, the pieces slammed into place with sickening force. The story was there, in the gaps between the facts. Caleb, the environmental lawyer, Sarah, his wife, Marcus, the corporate shark, her father, caught in the middle, a covered-up spill, and a death certificate that read accident. This wasn't about land, it was about a reckoning. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered. It was him. Caleb, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. Your father knew what Marcus did, he said, his voice quiet but heavy with a 9-year-old grief. He promised Sarah he would make it right. He never got the chance. Marcus buried it all after he died. My brother buried it. What do you want? Elara asked, her own voice barely a whisper. Justice, he said. The truth. That land you bought is toxic. The report your father suppressed proves it. Marcus is planning to build a luxury resort on top of a chemical dump site. He's using Vantage to cover his tracks and cash out. And Sarah? Elara asked, dreading the answer. She was a biologist, Caleb said. She was the one who discovered the contamination. She collected the samples. She was going to expose him. Her car went off the road on her way to meet with a journalist. The police found no evidence of foul play. I never believed it. A wave of nausea washed over Elara. The world she had built, the clean, orderly world of numbers and profits, was suddenly filthy. The foundation was rotten. Her injunction was an act of aggression against the wrong person. She had been a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Marcus had used her ambition, her drive to undo her father's perceived weakness, against her. He had pointed her like a weapon at his own brother. There was a long silence on the line. 2 seconds, long ones. He has the original report, doesn't he? Elara asked. Marcus, yes, Caleb confirmed, and he knows I'm looking for it. That's why he pushed you to acquire the land. He wanted to use Vantage's legal power to keep me out. He thought you'd be his bulldog. A cold fury began to replace Elara's shock. She had been used, manipulated. Her company, her father's legacy, was being leveraged to conceal a crime that had led to a woman's death. I'm not anyone's bulldog, she said, her voice hard as steel. She ended the call. Her mind was a whirlwind, but one clear thought emerged. She had to get to her father's archives. The physical archives, stored in the old family estate outside the city. If there was a copy of that report, if there was any other correspondence, it would be there. But she couldn't just leave. The injunction she had filed against Caleb made him a person of interest. She was now on the record as his adversary. If she suddenly changed course, Marcus would know. He would be suspicious. He would move to destroy any remaining evidence. She needed to be smart. She needed a plan. And she needed an ally. A new, unfamiliar feeling began to surface. She needed help. She needed Caleb Thorne. The next move came from Marcus. It was subtle, a corporate maneuver designed to box her in. He called an emergency board meeting. The agenda: a vote to fast-track the Blackwood Creek development, citing a time-sensitive offer from a resort consortium. He was forcing her hand, trying to get the project locked in before she could dig any deeper. The meeting was in 2 days. In the city. She was trapped. If she left, she couldn't get to the archives. If she stayed, she would miss the meeting, and Marcus would likely win the vote in her absence, painting her as an absentee CEO who had lost control. That night, the second attack came. It was not subtle. She was driving back from a late dinner in town, her rental car a small, anonymous sedan. On a dark, winding stretch of road, a large black truck, the kind used for logging, came up fast behind her. It tailgated her aggressively, its high beams blinding her in the rearview mirror. She sped up, her heart pounding. The truck stayed with her. As they entered a sharp curve, the truck swerved, nudging her rear bumper. The sedan fishtailed on the loose gravel shoulder. Elara wrestled with the wheel, her knuckles white. She was a good driver, precise and controlled, but this was a battle of physics she couldn't win. The truck hit her again, harder this time. The car spun out, crashing through a wooden guardrail and plunging down a steep, wooded embankment. The world became a violent, tumbling chaos of breaking glass and screeching metal. The car came to rest against a thick pine tree, the front end crumpled. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and hot engine oil. Her head was throbbing. She was bruised, disoriented, but miraculously she seemed to be in one piece. The truck hadn't followed. It had sped off into the night. This was a message from Marcus, a clear, brutal one. Stop digging. Her phone was cracked, but it worked. She had no signal. She was alone, in the dark, at the bottom of a ravine. The carefully controlled world of Elara Vance had completely disintegrated. She pulled herself from the wreckage. The night was cold. The woods were dark and filled with the unfamiliar sounds of the wild. For the first time in her adult life, she was truly helpless. And she was afraid. She started to climb the embankment, her ridiculous city shoes slipping in the loose dirt. She was halfway up when she heard a sound above her. The crunch of tires on gravel, headlights cut through the darkness. It was the old, rusted green truck. Caleb Thorne got out. He didn't say a word. He simply lowered a rope, one end tied securely to his vehicle's frame. He moved with the same deliberate competence she had seen at the airstrip, at his gate. He was a man who knew how to solve real-world problems. She took the rope. He pulled, his strength steady and sure, and helped her to the road. He looked at her, then at the wrecked car below. This wasn't an accident, he stated. No, she agreed, her voice trembling slightly. It wasn't. He took a blanket from his truck and wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of sawdust and wood smoke. It was a scent of safety, of substance. You need a safe place to stay, he said. My place. No one will look for you there. It was not a request. He was taking control of the situation, and for the first time, Elara ceded it without a fight. She was in his world now, and its rules were different. Survival was the only currency that mattered. She got into the passenger seat of the rusted truck. The cab was clean, but cluttered with the tools of a self-sufficient life: a thermos, a pair of worn leather gloves, a field guide to birds. Taped to the dashboard was a drawing. The same fierce bird with the big wings that Lily had shown her. They drove in silence through the night, taking a network of back roads Elara didn't know existed. The path to his home was more than just a driveway. It was a deliberate barrier. His house was not what she expected. It was a modern structure of wood and glass, built into the side of a hill, overlooking the valley. It was elegant and understated, a piece of sophisticated architecture hidden in the wilderness. Inside, the main room was dominated by a large stone fireplace and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The furniture was simple, handcrafted from local wood, built with the same care he had used to tie down the crate on his truck. Lily was asleep in a small room, a nightlight, casting a soft glow on her face. Caleb made her a cup of tea. He tended to the cut on her forehead with a quiet efficiency. His hands were gentle. She sat by the fire, wrapped in the blanket, the warm mug in her hands. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Marcus tried to kill me," she said, the words stark in the quiet room. Caleb nodded slowly. "He's desperate. He knows we're close to the truth." He sat in a chair across from her. The firelight played on the rugged lines of his face. She could see the deep well of grief he carried, but also an unshakable strength. He told her about Sarah, about their life together. She had been a brilliant botanist who had left a promising academic career to work on conservation. They had planned to build a research sanctuary on their land. She had been the one who first suspected the water in the valley was being poisoned. "Most people only see what's flowering," he said, his eyes distant. "They miss what's moving underneath." Sarah saw everything. He explained that Marcus had overseen a subsidiary of Vantage that was involved in high-tech manufacturing years ago. They had cut corners on waste disposal, dumping toxic byproducts into an abandoned mine shaft on the land Vantage owned. The land Elara now controlled. Sarah found their internal records, the ones Marcus thought he had destroyed. She had a copy. "That's what he's after," Caleb said. "The last proof. She hid it before she died. I've spent 9 years searching for it." Elara thought of the archives, her father's letter. He had known. He had been complicit in the cover-up, even if he regretted it later. The thought was a bitter pill. Her father, the Titan, was a man with deep, damaging flaws. Just like her. "Maybe she hid it somewhere you haven't looked," Elara said, her mind starting to work again, piecing things together like a corporate strategist. Somewhere he would never think to look. "The board meeting," she said, a new urgency in her voice. "It's in less than 2 days. Marcus will use it to seize control of the project. He'll bury that land under a mountain of concrete and legal documents." "We need proof," Caleb said. "Something concrete to show the board. Something to stop him." "My father's archives," Elara said. "At the estate. If there's a copy of your wife's report, or my father's copy of the original disposal records, it would be there. You can't go. They'll be watching you." "I know," she said, "but my lawyer can. Anya. I trust her." She used Caleb's satellite phone to call Anya. She explained everything, her voice low and rapid. The accident. The cover-up. Marcus, Sarah. She gave Anya the codes to the estate and told her where to look, in a false-bottomed drawer of her father's old desk. It was where he kept the things he wanted to hide, even from himself. Anya was silent for a moment, absorbing the enormity of it all. Then her voice was firm. "I'm on it. What do I do when I find it?" "Send it to me," Elara instructed. "Use the most secure channel you have. And Anya, be careful." The next 24 hours were the longest of Elara's life. She was a general without an army, a CEO without a company, hiding in the home of a man she had once dismissed. She saw his life up close. She watched him with Lily, their bond a quiet, powerful thing. He taught his daughter how to identify bird calls, how to read the weather in the clouds. They ate a simple meal of soup and fresh bread. It was more real, more nourishing than any $100 plate of food she had ever eaten in the city. She found herself wandering into his workshop. It was a cathedral of craftsmanship. Tools hung in perfect order. The air smelled of cedar and oil. In the center of the room was a half-finished rocking chair, its curves smooth and elegant. He built furniture. The crate she had seen him loading onto his truck, it had been a piece of his work, destined for a gallery in the city. The Gulf Stream was not a symbol of his wealth, but a tool, a delivery truck for his art. It was the ultimate, understated irony. He found her there, her hand resting on the smooth wood of the chair. "It's for Lily," he said, "for when she's older." "It's beautiful," Elara said, and she meant it. He walked over to a dusty cabinet in the corner. He hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside were boxes of research papers, field notes, and photographs. Sarah's work. He pulled out a single photograph. It was of a smiling woman with kind eyes, her hair caught in the wind. She was standing in a field of wildflowers. "This was her," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Elara looked at the photo of the woman whose death had set all of this in motion. A woman who had died for the truth. In that moment, the fight became personal for Elara too. It wasn't just about her company or her father's legacy. It was about honoring the memory of Sarah Thorne. Later that day, a message arrived from Anya. It was a single word, "Found." Attached was a heavily encrypted file. They opened it on Caleb's computer. It wasn't just one report. It was everything. The original disposal manifests, signed by Marcus. The internal memo warning of the environmental dangers. Sarah's detailed report, complete with soil and water sample analysis that showed contamination levels hundreds of times the legal limit. And one more thing. A sworn affidavit from her father, dated a week before he died. In it, he confessed to his role in the cover-up, detailed Marcus's threats, and stated his intention to turn the evidence over to the authorities. He had never had the chance. This was it. The smoking gun. "Now we have him," Elara said, a cold fire in her eyes. The plan was simple and audacious. Elara would attend the board meeting, not remotely, in person. She would walk in at the last minute, confront Marcus, and present the evidence to the entire board. "But how will you get there?" Caleb asked. "They'll be watching the airports, the roads." Elara looked at him, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I think I know a man with a plane." The flight to the city was tense. They flew through the night, a silent ghost in the sky. Elara sat across from Caleb, the tablet containing the evidence resting on the table between them. She was no longer the arrogant CEO from the airstrip. She was a woman on a mission, stripped down to her core essentials, her intelligence, her resolve, and a newfound, unshakable sense of purpose. They landed at a small private airfield outside the city just before dawn. Anya was waiting, a car ready. She handed Elara a briefcase. "Your war paint," Anya said with a grim smile. Inside was a tailored suit, the color of ash, a symbol of the old world, but one she would now wield for a new cause. The Vantage Corporation boardroom was on the top floor, a glass-walled cage overlooking the city. The mood was tense. Elara's seat was empty. Marcus Thorne was at the head of the table, his expression confident, almost smug. He was moments away from pushing his motion through. He was mid-sentence when the boardroom doors opened. Vance walked in. Silence fell over the room. Every eye turned to her. She looked pale, with a bruise darkening on her temple, but her gaze was steady. Her presence commanding. Behind her, Caleb Thorne stood in the doorway. He was not dressed for a boardroom. He wore his simple jeans and shirt. He was a silent, grounded presence, an anchor from another world. He was there as a witness. Marcus's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He recovered quickly. "Elara," he said, his voice a smooth veneer of concern. "We were worried. We heard you had a small accident." "It wasn't an accident, Marcus," Elara said, her voice calm and clear, ringing through the silent room. "And it wasn't small." She walked to the head of the table and placed the tablet down. On the large screen behind her, the documents began to appear. The disposal manifests, the environmental warnings, Sarah's report, her father's affidavit. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid out the facts, one after another, a cold, methodical demolition of Marcus's lies. She told them about the land, about the poison, about Sarah Thorne, about the cover-up that had spanned a decade. Marcus paled. He sputtered denials, calling it a fabrication, a desperate move by a failing CEO. But the evidence was undeniable. His own signature was on the documents. The data was irrefutable. The board members, men and women who dealt in risk and liability, stared at the screen in horror. They saw not a profitable resort development, but a corporate catastrophe, a legal and moral nightmare. My father made a mistake, Elara concluded, her voice ringing with a conviction she had never felt before. He allowed his ambition, and yours, Marcus, to blind him to what was right. He regretted it until the day he died. Today, I rectify that mistake. Vantage Corporation will not build on poisoned ground. We will not profit from a crime. She looked directly at Marcus, her eyes like chips of ice. As of this moment, you are removed from the board, and your employment is terminated. The authorities are on their way. It was over. The power didn't crumble, it evaporated. Marcus Thorne, the ruthless corporate predator, sat there, utterly defeated, a man exposed. The aftermath was swift. Marcus was arrested. The story broke, a scandal that rocked the financial world. But Elara handled it with a new kind of leadership. She didn't hide. She held a press conference, admitted the company's past failings, and laid out a clear plan for the future. Vantage would fund the complete environmental cleanup of the Blackwood Creek Valley. They would establish a multi-million-dollar environmental research foundation. It would be named the Sarah Thorne Foundation. The fight had taken everything out of her, but it had also forged something new in its place. She settled her affairs in the city. It took weeks. She restructured the company, promoting people of integrity, changing the very DNA of the corporation her father had built. She sold her penthouse apartment, the glass box in the sky that had been her fortress. She kept only a few personal belongings. One sunny autumn afternoon, she drove back to Blackwood Creek. Not in a chauffeured town car, but in a modest SUV she had bought herself. She drove straight to the Thorne property. The gate was open. She found Caleb and Lily down by a creek that ran through the property. They were repairing a small section of fence. Caleb looked up as she approached. He wasn't surprised to see her. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. Lily ran to her, holding up a new drawing. It was of 3 people, 2 large and 1 small, standing under a tree. She had drawn the sun in the corner of the page, shining down on them. Elara took the drawing, her heart full. Caleb handed her a fence post. He showed her how to set it, how to make sure it was firm in the earth. They worked together, their hands brushing occasionally, their movements falling into an easy, unspoken rhythm. The work was simple, real, and meaningful. When they were done, they stood and looked at their work. A small, sturdy section of fence. Some fences mark where land ends, Elara said softly, thinking of all the walls she had built around herself. Caleb stood beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. He looked out at the valley, clean and quiet in the late afternoon light. Others, he said, mark where it begins.